In the last video, we made this jacket mostly using cloud simulation brushes. If you haven't seen it, it's on the top right corner. Now we're going to use BlenderKit to texture it fully in Blender. If you want to use Quixel or Substance add-on, I don't care, it's literally the same procedure. Before we start, if you want to download the 3D files and real-time videos, check out my Gumroad and Patreon page. It also helps me make more videos like this. Link in the description. Let's go. First go to Edit, Preference, and in the add-ons, type in Blend. Then turn on BlenderKit. Press N to bring up the right menu. Then switch to BlenderKit tab. We want to texture the model, so let's switch to Material. Move your mouse here and drag out the new window and switch to Shading, so we got the material here. In the Import settings, turn off Auto Map, cause we already UV unwrapped the jacket. You can change the resolution of the textures here. In the search bar, type in Fabric and find something that fits your clothing. If you can't see the materials, click on this eye icon. I chose this dark fabric material and drag and drop it on the jacket. Hold Z and go to material preview. Now you see we got the material on the jacket. As you can see, BlenderKit imported all the nodes and textures, but it's way too big. So in the mapping, increase the scale number on XYZ so we get the smaller details. I'm gonna give different material to each part of the jacket, so we need to use alpha maps. In the shading tab, Shift A and add an image texture. Click on new, increase the resolution and name it maybe something like color alpha. Make sure you have Node Wrangler add-on enabled. Ctrl Shift and click on the image texture. Go to Texture Paint tab. I'm gonna give the color a separate material. Let's select the jacket. Press tab to go to edit mode. Select the faces in this area. Press tab to exit the edit mode. Click on this icon so we can only paint on these faces. Pick up a white brush and start painting the color. Now we can assign a new material to this white area. I turn off face mask and try to smooth out these edges. In the left window, go to Image, Save As, and save it in the Textures folder. Back to BlenderKit, let's find a new material for the color. This time I wanted something shinier, so I searched Fabric again and chose this one. Then drag and drop it on the jacket. Make sure you try out a few different materials to see which one works best. Again, it's way too big, so I increase the scale on the mapping. Now select all the nodes, except the output. Press Ctrl C to copy, then let's switch back to the previous material, and Ctrl V to paste it. Before you click anywhere else, move him to another location. Drag the material output to the right so it doesn't get confusing. I only needed the principal shader, so I delete these two. Then Shift A and add a mix shader and connect the image alpha texture that we made to the vector. Now what this mix shader does is that it separates the jacket from the color. First shader would be the jacket and the second one is the color. So let's connect the first material to the first shader and the second material to the second shader. Bring back the output, connect the displacement to the displacement, then mix shader to the surface of the output. Now we got both material at the same time and it looks pretty nice. You can also select the alpha image texture and change it whenever you like. Now we need a new alpha image texture for the bottom, so Shift A and add an image texture. Just like before, click on new and name it something else. Increase the resolution, then press OK. Go to Texture Paint tab, click on image and save as a new alpha texture. Back to layout, Ctrl tab and go to Texture Paint mode. Ctrl Shift click on the image texture, hold Z and go to solid mode to see the mesh better. And now we can paint this bottom area. After we took care of it, let's go back to the BlenderKit. I wanted something like woolen fabric, which is not shiny at all. So I found this carpet material that works pretty good here. So I drag and drop it on the jacket. After it was downloaded, just like before, I select all of them, Ctrl C to copy, switch back to our main material, then Ctrl V to paste it here. Move this one to a different location, then remove the material output. Shift A and add a mix shader. Then connect the principal shader of this new material to the mix shader. Then connect the previous mix shader to this one. Then obviously connect the new image alpha that we made to the vector. Now when we connect the new mix shader to the material output, we got three different materials in our jacket. The carpet material is kinda dark and I don't like it this way. What we can do here is to find the carpet material in the shading tab, press Shift A and add a bright contrast node and drop it between the image texture and the principal shader. Now we can change the brightness and contrast to get it closer to what we want. Now I'm gonna add a new material to this area and just like before, new image texture texture for the alpha, name it something else so we can paint. This part is behind the sleeves and it's kinda hard to reach it. So press tab to go to edit mode, select the sleeves and press H to hide them. Do that for the other side too. Press A to select all, then tab again to exit the edit mode. Make sure you enable the paint mask on the top, then start paint the areas you want. When the both sides is done, go ahead and save it with a new name. Now that we understand how the mixing works, back to shading tab, click on the last mix shader, shift D to duplicate and drop it on this line. Connect the new alpha to the factor. You can go ahead and download a new material for this part too. I wanted the same material as the color. We don't need to download it again. We just have to find its principal shader and connect it to the shader too. Now we got the same material here. You might ask, why didn't you just paint on the color alpha? Well, at first, I didn't know if I was gonna use the same material or a new one. That's why I made a separate image texture for it. At this point, the shading page is way too crowded and messy. It's really hard to find the materials. To organize it better, press Shift A and search frame. Hover your mouse to the edges and grab it to make it longer. That came out weird. Size doesn't matter though. Right? You just have to press N to bring up the right menu, and in the Node tab, under Properties, make sure Shrink is enabled. Now select all the materials in this section, drag and drop it in the frame. Now the frame should shrink down to the size of the material. Now in the Node tab, enable Color and change it to a different color, so it would be easier to spot it. In this case, I'm changing it to the color of the cloth. I did the same thing for the other two materials. Now we can easily tell which material is which. By now, you should know how to add a new material to the jacket, so I'm not gonna make the video longer than it should be. I painted a new image texture for this part and gave it the same material as the main material of the jacket, which is dark blue, but I wanted to make it a bit darker, only in this part. So I added a mix RGB, which is now called mix color, dropped it before the base color, then connected the new alpha image texture that we made to the factor, changed it from the mix to overlay. Now we can make it brighter or darker using the color too. Painted out the bottom of the sleeves and gave it the carpet material as the bottom of the jacket. Now that the base texture is done, we can move on to the details, like adding the logos and stuff. We can project the logos to the jacket using a stencil, but I recommend adding the full image to the shader so it would have more resolution. Find the jacket material in the shading, Shift A and add an image texture, then add a mix color and drop it before the base color. Connect the alpha to the factor, then color to color 2. Now open up your PNG logo. To fix the size, we need a new UV map. Shift A and add a UV map, then connect it to the image texture. Go to Object Data Properties. In the UV maps, click on this plus icon. Double click on it and name it logo. Now back to the shading, change the UV map to logo. Also change the image texture from repeat to clip. Now we only have one logo. Go to UV Editing tab, press A to select all. Move and scale up the UV until the logo is small enough and you placed it where you want it on the jacket. If you see a small outline around the logo, change the alpha to pre-multiplied. Also we can add some other things like stains and dirt. In Substance, it would take few clicks to add dirt and other stuff, but here we need to mix few shaders. You can download dirt PNG images, but I'm gonna make it all in Blender procedurally. First, let's add a frame. Shift A and add a Voronoi texture and drop it in the frame. Then Shift A again and add a Musgrave texture. Place it before the Voronoi texture. Set the Voronoi to Minkowski. Then connect the Musgrave texture to the exponent. While selecting the Musgrave texture, press Ctrl T to bring up the texture coordinates. We don't need the mapping, so get rid of it. Then connect the UV to the vector. Now Shift A to add a color ramp and drop it on the right. Then connect the color to the factor. In the material preview, hold Ctrl Shift and click on color ramp to see it on the jacket. Increase the scale on the Musgrave texture. Mess around with these numbers to get it closer to what you want. Once you are happy with the size and the detail, you can change the scale of the Voronoi texture as well. That changes the scale of these gray areas. It is still too sharp, so I'm gonna make it a bit blurry. Add a mix color and drop it before the Musgrave texture. Change it from mix to linear light. Then Shift A and add a white noise. Connect it to the color 2. Then connect the UV from texture coordinates to the white noise. Now enter a very small number on the factor. You can also drag the color ramp's handles. Now shift click on your last mix shader so we can see our main material. Then add another mix shader before the output and connect the color ramp to the factor of the mix shader. Navigate these dark areas on the jacket. Shift A and add a principal BSDF shader and connect it to the shader 2. It's way too intense. What we can do here is to click on this white handle. Then from the bottom, change the color to a darker color. I'm still not happy with the scale, so I Ctrl Shift on the Voronoi texture to see the texture again. Then change the scale of the Musgrave texture to my liking. And again, Ctrl Shift on the mix shader to see the final material. I'm gonna make a darker dirt texture, so I select both textures and the color ramp, then Ctrl Shift D to duplicate. Also duplicate this principal shader, then make the base color black. Duplicate this mix shader as well and drop it before the output. Then connect the black principal shader to the shader 2 and connect the bottom color ramp to the factor. Now Ctrl Shift again on the textures, then change the scale and other stuff to make it different than the first one. Once you are done, Ctrl Shift on the last mix shader. We can now increase the roughness of the dirt because obviously dirt is not reflective. Play around with the textures, especially with the color ramp, to change the intensity of the dirt. The finished material is already done. If you want to use it in Blender, you're good to go. But if you want to move it somewhere else, like Unreal Engine, you need to bake all of these textures into one material. There are a lot of videos covering baking textures in Blender, but quickly I'm gonna go over it. First, in the render properties, change the render engine from Eevee to cycles, because baking is only available on cycles. Then under bake, change the bake type from combine to diffuse or any other one you want. Shift A and add an image texture. Click on new, give it a name like diffuse, normal, or any other map. Turn off direct and indirect, and while the object and the image texture selected, click on bake. If you run into problems or the textures came out wrong, change the bake type to emit. Then go to shading, find the exact material. For example, connect the base color or diffuse to the emit of that principal shader. Do that for all of the different materials and absolutely make sure you don't miss one. And in the object data properties, active the main UV map. Then again, while the object and the image texture is selected, click on bake. It might take a few minutes, but after it's done, while the image texture is selected, go to UV editing tab and you should see this. All the diffuse maps from different materials are all in one texture without any issues. Make sure to go to image and save it in the textures folder so you won't lose it. Back to shading, don't forget to disassemble the diffuse from the emission. Then go ahead and switch the bake type to roughness. Add another image texture, name it roughness. Then change the color space to non-color. Select the object and the roughness image texture, then click on bake. Again, if this didn't work for you, just connect the roughness to the emission from different materials like the last one. Then change the bake type from roughness to emit, then bake. Don't forget to save your texture in the UV editing tab. Back to shading, disassemble the roughness from the emission, just like the last time. Then make a new image texture, increase the resolution, and name this one normal. Again, make it non-color, then change the bake type to normal. And while the object and the normal image texture is selected, click on bake. Your normal map should look like this in the UV editing tab. Do the saving and go back. If you have metallic or any other maps, do the same things as before. I got metallic and I found that the emission way works better, at least for me, so I connect the metallic to the emission. Some of them didn't have any metallic map, so I manually increased the emission to replicate the metallic. Made a new image texture, named metallic. While it's on non-color, change the bake type to emit and bake. Don't forget to save it in the textures folder. Shift A and add a principal BSDF shader. Connect the diffuse to base color, roughness to roughness, normal to normal, and obviously metallic to metallic. Ctrl Shift click on the principal shader to connect it to the output. Shift A and add a normal map and drop it between the normals. Lower the number of the strength, then while in render view, you should see the material work like a charm. And now you can get rid of all the other stuff. If you find this video helpful, like and sub would be fantastic. Be sure to check out my Gumroad and Patreon page to download the 3D files and real-time videos of making the characters. See you on the next one. Peace!